Hey, you're back listening to the Get Out of Debt Guy show. I'm Steve Rode, your old Get Out Debt Guy, and with me is Damon Day, the new Get Out Debt Guy. Say hey, Damon.
Hey, Damon.
Hey, you ever felt like your monthly bills are playing a game of financial Jenga? I mean, one wrong move, and the whole thing could come crashing down? Well, today, we're breaking down how to prioritize your payments without the stress, and we're demystifying that confusing, terribly confusing debt-to-income ratio so you can finally take control of your money with confidence. And let's make sense of the numbers together. Damon, this is an issue that people seem to stumble over perpetually. Ever since I started helping people in 1994, people get tangled up in, like, which debt is more important to deal with? What say thee?
Thee says it depends on what your goal is.
So the summary of the show is it depends. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, we're done. Have a good day. Be here all night.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, let's put this in a clear window for people that if your goal is A or B or C or D, then which payment takes priority can adjust. It all changes. There's no, listen to some personal finance guru and they always tell you do this and then this and then this. No, you work backwards from what your goal is.
Yeah, and we're basically talking about, in credit score versus debt to income ratio. Because when I talk to people all the time and it's my credit score this, my credit score that, I'm trying to do this, my credit score, my credit score, my credit score.
Yeah.
Nobody really ever talks about the debt to income ratio.
Right.
And until they try to get a mortgage and they have great credit and they're denied or they're appalled at the interest rate. And then they're like, oh, this debt to income ratio. And a lot of us have heard about this mystical debt to income ratio. And is it 36%? Is it 37? You want to have it under 36 and that sort of thing. But everybody seems to be, what can I do to improve my credit? And not so much focused on what can I do to improve my debt to income? Because I have a lot of people over the years that'll come to me and say, hey, I'm trying to buy this house. I need to improve my credit. I need to improve my credit. But yet their debt to income is,
Right.
70% or 60%. It's like, it doesn't really matter how good your credit is. If your debt to income is over 50%, you're going to have a heck of a time trying to qualify for that mortgage. So let's talk about that and what you could do there.
Yeah, I agree with you completely that people are always worried about their credit score. What's my credit score? But people are never worried about their debt to income ratio. And then when you ask them a question like, are you talking about your front end or your back end? They don't.
That's a different show, Steve.
Yeah. Got a money question keeping you up at night? Well, don't just Google it. Get real answers from real people who actually know what they're talking about. Head to getoutofdebt.org/podcast to ask your question, and you might hear it on an upcoming episode. But hey, if you'd rather keep it private, Damon Day has your back. Visit DAMONDAY.com because getting out of debt is easier with the right help. That's getoutofdebt.org/podcast, where smart money questions lead to smarter money moves. Oh, speaking of different show, I'll digress from, you just said mystical. The word mystical, I think.
I said mystical? I don't think so. Did I say mystical?
Magical. You said magical.
Oh.
So when my daughter was little, she had watched Charlotte's Web, and she got one of those, earworms of some song in the movie. And this is how way back it was, returning the video to the video store. And there she is, little girl, standing in the middle of the video store, singing Mystical Magical Testicles instead of Mystical Magical Templeton from Charlotte's Web.
What is she hearing in that home?
I don't know. I heard the story. My wife called me at work, and I was like, oh, no.
Well, speaking of video, Steve, did you know
What?
that video killed the radio star?
Yeah, I did. I did, because I watched the first MTV show, and they let me know that.
Video killed the radio star.
All right, so
who's running the show?
Templeton is running the show.
I almost spit my coffee, dude.
If I can get it to come out your nose, I'm winning.
It almost did.
All right. So let's talk about debt to income ratio since we launched into that first. Debt to income ratio is actually pretty simple. It's just your total monthly debt payments divided by your gross monthly income. So, if somebody's making $5,000 a month, let me first, if any of this sounds confusing, if you go to getoutofdebt.org, subscribe to my newsletter because I have 2 very in-depth articles on this. Damon's got them in front of him, and they're probably more information than you ever wanted to know. But if you read them, you will be the smartest person about this. So go to the site, subscribe to the newsletter, and you'll get notified when these come out. But in this one example in Article 1, Jake earns $5,000 a month before taxes, and his total monthly debt is $1,150. So $1,150 divided by 5,000 is 23%. So his debt to income ratio is 23%. Now, here's how to know if you're doing good or not so good. If your DTI range is below 36%, you are golden. You're awesome. If it's 36 to 43, you're okay. And if you're 44 to 50, you're in risky territory. Above 50%, as I say in the article, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
It's time to tackle the debt. Now, I did mention front end and back end. So front end is generally used for mortgages, and it's looking just at your housing costs, your mortgages, your taxes, and insurance. And then there's the back end, which is the housing costs plus all your other debts. You don't need to know this unless you're going to apply for a mortgage. Lenders like to see your front end DTI under 28% and your back end keep it under 43% to improve your chances of getting a loan.
I think everybody just switched to another podcast.
That was a lot of technical information.
Eyes glazed over. So I mean, basically, if you really break it down, the DTI really matters a lot when you're applying for a mortgage, if you're trying to get a house. And the focus is, yes, your credit score is important, but sometimes the debt to income can be more important. So if you're trying to put yourself in the best position to get a loan and get the best rate, not only do you need to focus on trying to have your credit as high as you can, but you also need to take a look at what things you're making what debts you're currently making monthly payments on, credit cards, car loans, anything else that you're having a debt obligation. Because the difference between credit score and the DTI, and Steve explains this in the article, is your credit score is kind of a window into your past, right? Like how have you done managing money and jumping through the various hoops that FICO likes you to jump through. And if you've done well, you have a high credit score. Whereas DTI is kind of more of a window into the future. Like, are you very likely to default on this new loan we're thinking about giving you? Because the higher that DTI is, the more risk you pose to the lender in the future. Because the more that debt servicing creeps into, eating away the amount of money you have every month, the easier it is for you to have something happen where you go, we can't afford to eat if we pay all of our debts. So are we going to maybe miss a car payment? Are we going to miss a mortgage payment? Are we going to stop paying on the credit cards? Because we're obviously not going to pay the car payment and then tell our son we don't have any dinner, right? So we're going to, as a family, we're going to prioritize these things. So the higher that debt servicing gets for a family, the more, the easier it is for them to have something happen in the future that goes, and then the whole thing crumbles down. So the higher that DTI is, the riskier the loan will be to the bank. And if they do approve the loan, it'll usually be at a higher interest rate to reflect that risk.
All right, here's a quiz for you. Which is more important? I'm going to listen to you quickly shuffling the papers to find that table in the article.
Papers?
Oh, you didn't print it out?
Papers.
Okay.
You hear my fingernails on my keyboard.
Okay. Oh my God.
Swift mouse movements.
Yeah, okay. So if you're going for a home loan, which is more important, a DTI or credit score?
They're both important, but I would say the DTI is something that could get you just declined right away.
Yeah. DTI is a higher importance if you're going for a home loan. If you're going for a debt consolidation loan, it's the same thing. It is higher than the credit score, more important than your credit score. But if you're going for an auto loan, this is where it flips, right? Your credit score is more important than your DTI for an auto loan. Same with credit cards. If you're applying for a new credit card, your credit score is the highest importance. The DTI is the lowest. So it's all about prioritizing. Now, here is something that is probably going to melt people's minds. If you want to improve your debt to income ratio, which debt do you pay off first? Common sense would say the highest interest rate debt, but that is not true. If your goal is to pay off, is to reduce your DTI, what you actually want to do is pay off the debt that has the highest monthly payments, but the lowest balance. Because what you want to do is knock out that balance quickly. Your goal is to improve your DTI, not to save a couple of bucks in interest. This is why you have to know what you're doing to prioritize. And
because remember the DTI that we're talking about, a lot of people just think it's your total debt to your total income, but that's not what it is. It's the monthly servicing cost of that debt. Because you just hear, debt to income. Oh, I owe $30,000 on the car. I owe $200,000 on the house. I owe this. And then you go, okay, my debt to income is, $400,000 in total debt and $80,000 a year in income. And oh my God, my DTI is upside down. I'm screwed. That's not what the DTI is. It's the monthly debt servicing obligation. So what Steve's talking about is if you've got a loan that has $900 balance on it, but it's got a $200 a month payment, and you're trying to lower your DTI to make you a better candidate for a lower interest rate, well, you want to knock out that $900 loan because that would free up that $200 a month. That monthly payment would come off your DTI and it would improve your DTI versus if you had another loan that was, say, $10,000 and a $300 payment, you'd have to spend a lot more money to pay off that $10,000 loan to get that $300 out of that ratio, where the other debt, you'd only have to spend $900 to wipe out $200, hopefully that makes sense.
You have to put all the common sense stuff that you've heard over all the years about pay off the highest interest rate debt first. You got to put that aside. In the example in the article, which you will all read, you will see that the most logical thing to do, I don't care what the interest rate is, but in this example, Jake had a furniture loan that Damon just alluded to that had a balance of $900, a monthly payment of $200. He could knock out 4% of his total debt quickly just by focusing on that loan instead of the credit card debt.
And keep in mind, all this circles back to what we said is clear as mud at the beginning, which is the right answer depends on what your goal is. Because when Steve's talking about, you hear about, paying off the highest interest rate first. Well, that does make the most sense if your goal is to try to minimize the overall interest that you're paying on your debts and you're trying to snowball those down. But if your goal is, I want to get the best rate on my mortgage that I'm going to apply for in 2 or 3 months, then it doesn't matter about what credit card has the highest interest rate in that moment. You're trying to go in and kind of triage, how can I put lipstick on a pig as quickly as possible and pretty up these numbers before I hand my paperwork to the lender.
It's funny. You go apply for a mortgage. Nobody ever asks you, hey, what's your interest rate? Like on your credit cards or your car loan or anything. They just look at these numbers. They don't care about the interest rate.
Yeah. And there's a lot of nuances, within this stuff. I remember one time, this was back a while ago, I had good credit. It was after my bankruptcy, but I still had really good credit. And I was making good money. And I already had 2 car loans because at the time, interest rates on car loans it was like dirt cheap. So it was like, why in the hell would I just buy a car? The rates are 3% right now, So I had 2 outstanding car loans and I needed a third car. And then my credit was fine. I went and, did the financing, all that stuff. And they came back and they're like, we're having a hard time getting the loan approved. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, you've got these 2 other loans and most lenders aren't that comfortable having 3 car loans at the same time because it was just me applying for the car loan. And they're like, can your wife apply for the loan? I'm like, no, she doesn't want to be involved in this. This is my car. And they're like, well, we're having a hard time, approving the loan unless you pay off one of these other 2. And I was like, why? because even my overall DTI was still fine, but just a lot of lenders just had an issue with, why does one guy need three different car loans at the same time?
Good question.
So it was just raising a red flag. And it was like, well, we can get the loan approved, but it's not going to be at 3%. It's going to be at like 6%. And so then I was just like, never mind, forget it. I'll go pay off this other loan and then I'll come back and get that one. But lenders have, different requirements, even if it's not something that's well known. You won't even find out till you get in there. But a situation like that, it had to do with the DTI, but for that lender, it was how much specific car debt that applicant had at the same time. And because they looked at that as more of a risk, because it was a total of 3 different vehicles for just one person, which they kind of classified as more of a luxury than a necessity. One car loan for one person, that's kind of a necessity. The lender feels like that's like almost like a mortgage. Like the person's not going to let their car payment go. They need the car to get to work, right? That makes them feel better. But the third vehicle for that person, they don't need the third car to get to work. If crap hits the fan, that third car might not get paid, right?
Well, it's like, some guy has a pickup truck, a work truck, and now he wants to buy a Harley. That motorcycle loan is going to be potentially the toughest one to get.
Yeah. Yeah. So the DTI played a role in that, but it was the DTI of actual car payments in that situation for one person. They didn't have an issue with anything else. It was just like, why do you need a third car? It's like, none of your damn business. I want it.
Well, you brought up a good idea for a future show. We'll have to try to remember it. But you know how every credit score is different depending on what you're applying for.
Oh, absolutely. It gets mind-boggling when you really start looking at FICO 8, FICO 9, and okay, is this, are they using the FICO 7 model for a mortgage? Or are they using the FICO 8 model for credit cards?
And how did they change it?
Yeah, and it's no wonder people are like, well, no, my credit score is 720, and the bank comes back and says, no, it's 680. No, I just pulled it up. It's 720. No, you pulled up the wrong thing. You pulled up the wrong version of FICO, and you looked at the FICO for credit cards, but we have a different version of FICO for mortgages. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, checking your credit score frequently does not lower your score, but it also doesn't tell you what your true score is. Yeah. The best way to think of it is an approximation.
Well, and we should do a different show on it because I've got some good tips on when you are car shopping. And so you don't want to just go around and just start applying for loans from all these different, dealers or whatever and do that. What I would always do when I'm shopping for a car and a car loan, I call wherever it is ahead of time and wherever they're going to be doing their financing from, whether it's a bank or whatever, or if I'm getting my own loan, which I typically do, I'll call around, I'll call different banks. And then I have a list of questions I ask them. Okay, when you guys do car loans, most people say, well, what are your rates for a new car? And they'll get the rate and they go, okay, that's great. Well, what I do is I say, okay, what are your rates? Okay, now, what version of FICO do you guys use? That's number one, right? Are you using FICO 8? And a lot of times I'll stump them. They got to go, well, hold on a second. I got to go find,
that's not a common question.
Yeah, what version of FICO are you using? What credit report agency do you use? Are you using TransUnion? Are you using Equifax? Are you using Experian? Are you using 2 of them, 1 of them, all 3 of them? Right? You have to find that out. And then from that information, then I can go to myfico.com and pay for the monthly $40 a month or whatever. And then the MyFICO will give me all of those different numbers. Here's your FICO 8, here's your FICO 9, here's your FICO 7, if you're looking for an auto loan, it's this number. And then I can actually narrow it down and see, okay, this is what my interest rate is probably going to be. And oftentimes it won't be the same as the quoted interest rate if I'm just looking at my Credit Karma score or something like that. It's going to be completely different, but that way I can really narrow down what my rate would very likely be at that bank without making me have to actually apply for the loan and then later here's the rate and then I come back and I don't like that rate.
Right. Hey, you wanted to talk about prioritizing payments. We're not the DTI stuff that I vented about, but you wanted to talk about like which payments are more important when dealing with your debt.
That was kind of the what started the idea of this podcast. And then you said, hey, that kind of merges into, this article I just wrote about the DTI. And I had a client recently, and when she called me, her concern was, they made good money, but they were already pretty much maxed out on credit card payments. And they were at a point where they just had no more wiggle room. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the big stressor was that they had back taxes from the IRS that they were going to need to put together an agreement, a payment plan to pay the back taxes. But she did not have any extra funds in her budget to pay for the taxes. So she was really stressed about this and did not know what she was going to do. She put in for an extension, bought herself a few months to try to figure it out, but she still didn't know what to do. They didn't have the ability, at least in the short term, to make some extra money. And I pointed out the fact that, well, the good news is you have all this debt. Most of your extra money is going towards all this other unsecured debt. And what we need to do is just kind of take a step back and say, wait a minute, the IRS is a priority creditor. They don't care about your credit cards or anything like that. So the good news is you do make good income. We can satisfy the IRS, but we just have to get more creative with what we're going to do on these credit cards. So the whole point was a lot of people get so stuck in, well, I have to pay this, I have to pay this, I have to pay this, but now there's no money for the IRS that I owe. That's backwards. We got to, okay, what are we going to have to pay the IRS? Now, what do we have left? Because I will tell you 100%, it is much easier to convince Chase to take less money than it is to convince the IRS to take less money, right? So let's work with the Chase and the Bank of Americas and the Amexes and put together a better deal for you with them, and then just let the IRS, okay, I got to pay you $300 a month. Fine, I can do that. Where am I going to find that $300 in my budget? Hey, Chase, I can't pay you right now. We'll figure it out.
Peace out, brother.
Yeah, so the point is, you have to just prioritize those obligations and not really panic, but you definitely never want to be in a situation where you're keeping your credit cards current and getting to the point where the IRS is sending you notices with, intent to levy and things like that, because the IRS does not have to sue you. They can just tell your bank, hey, give me the money that's in there. Thank you. Whereas Chase cannot do that. Chase has to go through a lot of hurdles before they could do that. And they're much easier. And I'm not picking on Chase. That just happens to be the one on top of my brain right now. But any credit card, any kind of consolidation loan, unsecured debt, hell, even mortgages and cars, those are easier to negotiate with than the IRS.
Well, in mortgages, I have over the years had more people who have been surprised that they have gone into foreclosure because the credit card companies have been the ones shouting the loudest. And so they get distracted. And it's like the IRS. The IRS doesn't have to shout at all.
Yeah.
They just come in and say, excuse me. And I'm actually more concerned about, with all the changes that are going on right now at government agencies, I can see, it was already kind of dysfunctional at the IRS, getting one hand to tell what the other hand was doing. But with reduced staffing, if there became more of an emphasis on collections, I think that they would just roll out levies right and left, and then you would have a hell of a time trying to get in touch with somebody. So don't ignore, if they're contacting you and you think that that's a priority, talk to Damon about it. You can reach Damon at Damon Day, DAMONDAY.com. He's got a beautiful website, and he's the guy that I recommend to everybody. Since I don't talk to people anymore one-on-one, Damon is the go-to guy. He's my number one debt coach in the entire, I'm going to go with world. Yeah, I'm going to go with world.
Yeah, so, and the website, it's simple. That's why it's beautiful. It just got redone. We stripped away a lot of the stuff that I've had on it over the years that was just, old. I put together that website myself back, 20 years ago, Steve? And I didn't really know what I was doing back then. And it didn't age well either. It was just all over the place. So we finally just got it boiled down and simplified to what it needed to be. And it's easy to read on my old website was even hard to read on a phone. It wasn't even mobile friendly. That's how old it was. And Steve was like, dude, at some point you need to really think about just streamlining this website. But I've just never, I was like, I don't even know if I know how to log into this thing anymore and fix it.
Well, it looks beautiful now. So
it does look good now. Yeah.
Even if you don't need Damon's services, go take a look at his website and send him a comment. Say, dude, this looks beautiful, right? DAMONDAY.com. So yes,
I was going to say, don't oversell it, because then they're going to be expecting some Taj Mahal looking website. Like, what is this thing?
There are no naked pictures on it, so
it's just beautiful in its simplicity.
That's right. So in prioritizing debts, again, this comes down to I'm not casting blame on anybody, but people just don't know what they don't know. And so the minute you start assuming whether it's your debt to income ratio or which payment should I prioritize or how should I tackle my debt, you are not stupid or wrong for not knowing. You just don't know because most of the information out there is trying to sell you a widget, whether it's sell you a book or a course or a service or, debt settlement or credit counseling or something. Everybody's trying to sell you their widget. And they try to sell a simple one size fits all. And unfortunately, that's not the way that finances work.
Well, and a lot of it is just paralyzing, right? Going back to the example of the client I talked to last week, and she's just, I have no extra money. I don't know what to do. I know I got this letter from the IRS and I have no extra money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, okay, that's when we need to step back and let's just make a plan. You do have the extra money. You're just not allocating it in the right direction right now.
Right.
You've got the money to solve this problem, but we have to really take a look at where this, I don't remember what it was. I think it was like $2,000, maybe it was even up to $3,000 a month they were paying on these unsecured debts. And it's like, there's options there. We don't have a lot of options with the IRS. There are some options with the IRS, but not in the situation she was in. You can do offer and compromises with the IRS,
Mm-hmm.
and you can set up payment plans and things like that. But the problem with dealing with the IRS is even if you're maxed out on payments, they look at what you make and then what you owe them.
Yeah, they don't care about the
what
rest.
you owe
No.
other people.
No.
So that's what they look at. And so in most cases, the IRS comes back and says, you can easily afford to get on a payment plan over the next couple of years and pay off this debt. And you say, no, I can't. I have this credit card and I have that and I have that. They don't care about that, right? So you can do it. And just the brief time, and the one call I did with her, looking at her situation, we can handle, she has the funds to handle the IRS debt, and then she'll have enough funds left over to handle all that other unsecured debt. She won't be able to probably do it in a traditional way. We might have to look into some rate reduction or some settlement type options, but those options are there. So it's important you take a step back and you look at everything and you really understand it and not go into it from this place of fear, and because fear will paralyze you into inaction
and making bad decisions.
Or worse, making no decision at all. And all of a sudden that notice of intent to levy will just turn into a notice of levy.
Yeah.
Right. So when it's at the intent, we still have time.
Right.
When it's at the notice of levy, it's, oh shit.
Yeah.
And then that money will be gone, and then she'll be forced into having to take action, but now she'll have to do it with no money because it got frozen.
The funny thing is that the IRS comes in hot and heavy, like you mentioned, and they can force people into bankruptcy to deal with their other debts that they can't service. Forced by emotional force, not directly forcing you. But most people, I don't think, understand that even IRS debts can be discharged in bankruptcy if they're more than 3 years old.
Yes.
So the IRS can push you hard to deal with your situation only to help you resolve your situation by going through bankruptcy.
Well, you said the IRS can come in hot and heavy.
Yeah.
I say the IRS comes in falcon heavy.
Falcon heavy.
And the reason Steve's laughing, and if you're not laughing, it's only because you don't have a Tesla. Tesla owners would laugh at that joke.
I do like my Teslas.
And Steve, what is falcon heavy?
I have no idea. I was thinking of Star Wars.
You don't know what falcon heavy is?
No.
You know what? This is why. Steve's the old get out of debt guy.
Yeah.
So he must not have kids. He doesn't. My kids play with my Tesla when I got it.
Uh-huh.
And the first thing they discovered was the falcon heavy fart noise.
Oh, is that what it's called?
That's one of the. Elon puts different fart sounds in
I always
Tesla.
do the random one.
Falcon, well, on the random setting, falcon heavy is one of those that come out. So the Tesla farts falcon heavy. So anyway, if you have to explain it, it's not as funny.
I think that they should rename them to what George Carlin once said in a comedy routine. There should be 3 sounds. Oh, actually, more than that. There's the fizz, the fazz, the fizz-fazz, the rip shit, the tear ass, and a number 2.
I love George Carlin, but I've never heard that bit. I'm going to have to Google. That must have been from more of his work in the 70s.
Yeah.
The old get out of debt guy coming at you.
All right, David.
Remember, prioritizing the debts, the IRS comes in falcon heavy. the credit cards more random fart.
Okay. Fizz-fazz.
Yeah, it's only the best financial information on this show, folks.
Yeah. So clearly, this is stuff you cannot get elsewhere.
You absolutely cannot get this elsewhere. It does not exist.
All right, Dave, until next time, I will see ya.
Peace.
Got a money question keeping you up at night? Well, don't just Google it. Get real answers from real people who actually know what they're talking about. Head to getoutofdebt.org/podcast to ask your question, and you might hear it on an upcoming episode. But hey, if you'd rather keep it private, Damon Day has your back. Visit DAMONDAY.com because getting out of debt is easier with the right help. That's getoutofdebt.org/podcast, where smart money questions lead to smarter money moves.